The sand in the challenge circle was already dark with blood, and the king was on one knee, and the whole court had gone silent, and this time the silence was not for me. I stood at the edge of a ring I had no rank to enter, watching the strongest wolf alive kneel in his own fighting circle, with a wound in his side that should not have been there, and the war marshal standing over him with a blade that gleamed wrong, and every lord in that hall frozen because they had all decided, days ago, how this was going to end. And I understood, with a cold clarity that had nothing meek left in it, that I was the only person in the room who had seen what put the king on his knee. And that if I kept my head down and my mouth shut the way a lower Mega is supposed to, he was going to die of it. So I did the thing I had spent my whole life not doing, and the thing that had started all of this in the first place. I opened my mouth. And I growled. But that is the end of it, near enough, and a woman who tells you the end before she has earned it deserves to be turned off. Let me go back to the grievance hearing I had no business speaking at, and a growl I did not decide to make. I have spent my whole life being small. I want to say that plainly, because it is the thing you have to understand about me before any of the rest makes sense. I am an Omega, and I was born at the very bottom of the pack, below the warriors, below the general run of wolves, below very nearly everyone, and a wolf-born that low learns one lesson before all the others: keep your wolf small. Do not bristle. Do not meet an eye you were not invited to meet. A low Omega who lets her wolf show its teeth, even once, even by accident, does not usually get to be a low Omega for very long. I learnt it young. I was very, very good at it. 26 years old, and I had never once in my life let anyone see the animal in me stand up. Which is why what happened at the hearing was so completely, catastrophically out of character that I still, to this day, do not entirely understand how my own throat betrayed me. The grievance hearings were a public thing. The Alpha King sat in judgment over disputes too small for a council and too large for a village to settle, and the low pack came to be heard, or more often to watch someone else be heard and be grateful it was not them. I had come for a neighbour of mine, an old half-deaf still-room woman who had been cheated of her winter grain by a ranked warrior who knew she could not read a tally and could not challenge him. It was a small, ugly theft of the kind that happens to people at the bottom all the time, and I had come to stand with her, because no one else would, and because I have never been able to watch someone be made hungry when I could do something about it. That is not a virtue. It is closer to a wound. I had not meant to speak. Low Omegas do not speak at hearings. But the warrior lied, smoothly, and the king, thorn of the Iron Territories, cold and enormous on his wolf-carved throne. A man whose reputation was his armour, and whose armour had clearly never once been dented, seemed inclined to believe him, because a king has better things to do than weigh the word of a deaf old woman against a ranked man. And he made a remark, a dismissive, closing sort of remark, the kind a powerful man makes when he has decided a small matter beneath him. Something about the difficulty of settling disputes where one party could not even keep her own accounts. And something in me, some animal thing I had spent 26 years sitting on, stood all the way up before my mind could stop it. I growled at the Alpha King. Not a whimper, not a low frightened sound, a growl, a real one. Up from the chest, teeth in it. The sound a wolf makes at another wolf, who has just done something its own honour cannot let stand. It came out of me in the middle of the king's own hall, aimed at the king's own throat, and the instant it was out I would have given every year of my life to call it back. The whole court went silent. I have been in quiet rooms. I had never been in a silence like that one, the silence of 100 wolves who have just watched the lowest creature in the room bare her teeth at the highest, and are waiting, in a kind of collective held breath, to see the lowest creature die for it. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the stone floor to open. I dropped my eyes, and my whole body went cold, and I braced for whatever comes to an Omega who forgets, for one fatal second, who she is talking to. The king of the Iron Territories looked at me, and he laughed. I did not understand it. No one understood it. It was not a cruel laugh, not the laugh of a man about to enjoy a punishment. It was startled out of him, sudden and real and astonished. A great warm sound that cracked across that frozen hall like a log breaking open, and it was, I would learn, the first time in living memory that anyone had heard the Alpha King laugh at all. Wolves who had served him for years turned to stare at him as though a statue had spoken. His second, a broad, wary man named Callum, actually took a step forward as if to catch something falling, and in the ringing aftermath of it, the king's wolf came out from behind the throne, the great dark beast of him, and it did not stalk toward the insolent Omega to put her down. It came down the length of the hall to where I stood shaking, and it lowered its huge head to my level, and it growled back at me. Softly, an answer, a wolf replying to a wolf, the way an equal answers an equal. And its tail was moving, and I understood even through my terror that the beast was not angry. The beast was delighted. Well, the king said, into a silence that had not the faintest idea what to do with itself. He was still almost smiling. I watched him try to put it away and fail. The old woman keeps her grain, and the warrior repays what he skimmed, with a fine on top for lying to my face. His winter grey eyes came back to me, and there was something in them I could not read and did not trust. And the Omega who just growled at her king will attend this court tomorrow and the day after, so that I may determine what exactly is to be done with her. I did not sleep that night. I lay in my cold little room and composed my own eulogy and decided it would be a short one. If you want to know what a king's laugh actually meant that day, and whether a low Omega who bared her teeth at the throne lived long enough to find out, because there were those in that court who meant to see that she did not, then stay with me. Follow this one to the end. The whole pack had a story about what happened at that hearing. Even I had a story about it. And the story we all told was wrong in one specific place, and that place is where the whole thing turns. I attended court the next day, certain it was the last thing I would ever do. He did not punish me. He asked my opinion. That was worse. Do you understand how much worse that was? A grievance came before him, a boundary dispute between two ranked houses, tedious and mean, and in the middle of it the Alpha King turned to the lowest ranked person in his hall, the Omega he was supposedly deciding the fate of, and asked me, in front of everyone, what I thought. And I, having decided I was already dead and therefore having nothing left to lose, told him, bluntly, that both houses were lying and he was letting them, and that the actual injured party was the tenant farmer neither house had bothered to summon. The court made a sound like a room full of people swallowing at once. The king leaned back on his wolf throne and looked at me for a long moment, and then he summoned the tenant farmer. And the tenant farmer told the truth, and the king ruled the way I had said he should, and I stood there having just won an argument with the Alpha King in his own hall and felt the entire court revising, very rapidly, its estimate of how the world worked. It became a pattern, and the pattern was unbearable. He kept me at court. He kept asking, and this is the part I am not proud of, the part that felt less like courage than like a cliff I could not stop walking off. I kept answering. Every time he left me an opening, I fell into it. Every time he said something I could not let stand. My wretched, honest wolf stood back up, and I said the true thing, out loud, to the most powerful man alive, in front of a court that watched each time with the appalled fascination of people watching someone juggle knives. And each time, some piece of the king's armour came off in public. He lost arguments to me. He conceded points. Once, when I caught him in a genuine error of law and said so, he inclined his head, the Alpha King, inclining his head to a low Omega, and the Master of Arms had to leave the hall. And every single time, his wolf was delighted. It answered my growls. It took to lying near me at council, at my level, on the floor, a beast that outranked every warrior in the room, choosing to keep company with the pack's lowest wolf as though we were den mates. It would bring me things, not stolen finery, nothing so simple. It brought me its own worried bones and half-gnawed things, the way a wolf shares with a packmate it has decided to feed, which is a far more intimate and scandalous thing, and the court did not know where to look. I laughed about it once, alone, and then stopped, because I did not understand it, and things I do not understand have always been the ones that got people like me killed. Lord Dane understood it, or thought he did, and Lord Dane was the one who meant to see me dead. He was the war marshal, the king's own champion, the wolf who commanded the warriors, and the true engine, I came to see, of the throne's power. Because Thorne ruled by being feared, and Dane was the one who had spent years making sure he was, who kept the machinery of that fear oiled and running, who had grown so accustomed to a king whose menace he could point wherever he liked that he had come to think of the throne's dread as his own possession. And a king who laughed, a king who lost arguments to an Omega and let his wolf lie on the floor with the lowest of the pack, was a king whose fear was leaking out of Dane's hands like water. So he made his first move, and he made it in open court, dressed as loyalty. "My king," he said, one grey afternoon, in a voice pitched to carry to the farthest wall, "I must speak, though it grieves me. The whole territory has heard how the Omega growled at you. Under the old law, a wolf who offers challenge to her alpha, and a growl is a challenge, the law is clear. Answers for it with exile or her life. You have let it pass. You have, forgive me, rewarded it. The low pack watches. The rival territories watch. They do not see a merciful king. They see a king whose authority a bottom-rank Omega may bite at without consequence. He spread his hands, reasonable, ruinous, for the strength of your own throne, enforce the law. Let her be made an example, or every wolf who ever chafed under your rule will remember that the king let himself be growled at, and did nothing. It was cleverly done. He had made my mercy into the king's weakness. He had built it so that to spare me was to prove Dane's point, and to look strong the king would have to destroy me. I stood in that hall and felt the trap close, and I saw, in the faces of the old warrior lords, that a great many of them agreed with Dane, that they too were frightened of a king who laughed, that they too wanted the Omega dealt with, so the world could go back to being a place they understood. The king did not have me killed. But I saw, for the first time, that it cost him something not to, that Dane had put him in a corner where every choice bled him. And I could not understand why a proud king would pay that price, in public, for a low Omega he had known a fortnight. It made no sense. Unless the story I had been telling myself about the hearing was wrong somewhere. It was. I found out where that night. I had gone to return the wolf's latest offering. I could not keep letting the beast bring me its bones. The court was scandalized enough. And I found the king alone in the mews above the fighting yard, watching his warriors drill by torchlight, and I did the thing I had apparently become unable to stop doing. I asked him the true question, bluntly, to his face. "Why won't you just be rid of me?" I said. "Dane's right about one thing, I'm costing you. Every argument you lose to me, every time your wolf lies down with the bottom of your own pack, you bleed a little standing you can't spare, and he's counting every drop. So end it. Punish me, banish me, I don't care which. Stop paying for a low Omega you met 2 weeks ago. It doesn't make sense, and things that don't make sense get people like me killed." The king was quiet for a long moment, watching the torchlight. When he answered, his voice had lost the armor entirely. "Do you want to know a thing no one in this kingdom knows?" he said. The growl at the hearing. He turned to look at me. It was not an accident. Not entirely. And it was not my wolf. He said the next part slowly, like a man setting down something he had carried a long way. "I had been watching you for weeks before that hearing. The Omega who stood with the deaf woman when no one else would. The one who watched every ruling I made with her jaw, set like she was biting back 100 things she was too low to say. I recognized you before my wolf did. That is the part not even Dane has guessed. And I wanted, more than I have wanted anything in 10 years of being feared, to know what you would say if you ever let it out. So at the hearing I made that remark, the cruel one, about the accounts. I said it to you. And I said it because I knew, I hoped. It was the one thing your honor would not be able to swallow. His jaw worked. I provoked you into growling at me in open court. And when you did, I laughed. Because I could not help it, because someone had finally answered me as a wolf and not a weapon. And then I told the whole court my wolf was delighted, and let them believe the beast had run ahead of the man, because a king like me is permitted to have a headstrong wolf. He looked away. He is not permitted to admit that the man, underneath, was starving. 3 sentences past any cap a story is built to hold, and I let him have every one, because a man does not say a thing like that in 3 sentences, and I have never been made of rules. And the whole shape of it turned over in my chest at once. The story the entire court told, the story I had told, was that the king's wolf was delighted, the beast ahead of the man, the way it always is. And it was a lie he had hidden inside on purpose. It was never the wolf. It was him. The proud, feared, untouchable king had reached down into the bottom of his own pack and deliberately picked a fight with a low omega, because in a whole kingdom of wolves who cowered when he entered a room, he had not once, in 10 years, been treated as though he were simply a person you could be angry at. That was the moment the fear went out of me, and something with a spine took its place. You've spent 10 years making everyone in this kingdom too frightened to talk back to you, I said, and my voice had changed. And I heard it change. And it turns out that's the loneliest thing I've ever heard, and I've been lonely in ways you can't imagine. So I'm going to stop apologizing for the growl. I took a step toward the Alpha King, which no low omega does, and I did not drop my eyes. You wanted someone who'd answer you like an equal. Fine, here I am. I'm going to keep answering you, out loud, in front of your court, in front of Dane, on purpose now, not by accident. And you're going to stop hiding behind your wolf and admit it's you who wants it. Because your armor isn't your throne, Thorn, it's your cage. And I have spent my whole life small enough to know a cage when I'm looking at one. He looked at me like a man who had been handed something he did not believe he was allowed to hold. Dane made his real move a week later, when he saw the king stop hiding, when the whole court watched Thorn concede an argument to me, and, for once, not blame it on his wolf. That was the moment Dane understood he had lost the war of whispers. So he stopped whispering and reached for the one thing that had always settled matters in the Iron Territories, the oldest law of all. He challenged the king for the throne. He did it in open court, in ancient form, and he wrapped it in righteousness. The king had gone soft, bewitched by a low omega, unfit to hold the pack against its enemies. And Dane, loyal Dane, strong Dane, would prove the stronger wolf in the circle, as the law allowed, and take the burden the king could no longer carry. Blood law. A dominance challenge. There was no refusing it without conceding the throne, and Thorn, who had spent 10 years being feared instead of tested, who had let Dane be his teeth for so long that his own had gone unused, had to meet the strongest, cruelest fighter in his kingdom in the circle, alone, and that is the moment I began this story with. The sand already dark. The king on one knee, because Dane fought dirty, and Dane fought to kill, and halfway through the challenge I saw the thing no one else was positioned to see. When they came together and broke apart, there was a gleam along the edge of Dane's blade that did not belong there, a wet, oily sheen, wrong in the torchlight, and I had spent enough years in still rooms fetching for healers to know an envenomed edge when I saw one. Dane had poisoned his blade. Against every law of the challenge, he had come to make sure that even a scratch would fell the king, and he had already opened a long line in Thorn's side, and I could see the poison beginning its work in the way the king's knee had buckled, in the grey creeping into a face that should have been flushed with the fight. The court did not see it. The court saw only the king failing, and half of them had already decided that meant the king was meant to fail. I was a low omega at the edge of a circle I had no rank to enter, and I had 2 choices, and they were the same 2 choices I have had my whole life: be small and safe and silent, or open my mouth and pay for it. I opened my mouth. And I growled. It tore across that hall the way it had torn across the hearing, up from the chest, teeth in it, and in the shock of it. The lowest wolf in the pack baring her teeth in the middle of a king's challenge, the whole court froze and turned, and into that frozen half-second I had bought, I shouted the truth. His blade is fouled. Look at it. Look at the edge. He's poisoned it. There's no scratch that isn't a death wound with venom on the steel, and the law of the circle is blood, not poison. The marshal is cheating to kill his king. The hall erupted. The old warrior lords, who lived and died by the law of the circle, surged to see, and there it was, plain on the blade for anyone with eyes, the oily wrongness of it, and Dane, exposed, did the thing cornered men do. He abandoned the pretense and lunged to finish Thorn before the truth could matter. Poisoned steel driving down at a kneeling king. I was already moving, I have no rank and no strength worth boasting, but I had crossed into that circle before I decided to, and I put myself into the space where the blade was going, and I got a hand on Dane's arm, not to stop it, I could never have stopped it, only to spoil it. And the poisoned edge that was meant for the king's throat opened a long line across my shoulder instead. The pain was enormous. But it brought a heartbeat, and a heartbeat was all Thorn needed. Because his wolf answered my growl. I heard it, felt it, the great dark beast of him surging up through the poison, and the pain at the sound of its packmate in the circle. And the king came off his knee with the last of his strength and the first honest fury I had ever seen in him, and he took the marshal down clean, with his hands, the way the law demanded, the way he should have been allowed to from the start. Dane went into the bloody sand and did not get up, and the healers had the poison off both of us before it finished its work, though it was a near thing. Nearer for the king than for me, and I carry the mark of that blade on my shoulder still. Lord Dane lived to be judged, which was worse for him than the circle would have been. Stripped of his marshal's rank, his cheat witnessed by the whole court that had nearly crowned him, exiled under a writ that named him Oathbreaker in the oldest terms the pack has. The warriors who had wavered toward him watched a lower mega catch the treachery they had all missed, and the Iron Territories has not, since that day, mistaken fear for strength quite so easily. The king rose in his own circle, bleeding, grey with poison, and he did not go to his healers. He came to me, where they were binding my shoulder, and he did the thing his whole proud life had trained him never to do. He knelt. In front of the entire court, in the bloody sand, the Alpha King knelt to the lowest wolf in his pack. For 10 years, he said, and his voice filled the hall to the rafters, I let a man make me into a weapon. Because a weapon is feared, and I mistook being feared for being strong. And a lower meagre growled at me in my own hall, and I felt, for the first time in a decade, like a wolf and not a blade, and I hid what that meant behind my own beast, because I was too proud to say it out loud. He looked up at me, grey and bleeding and unarmoured at last. It was never my wolf that was delighted, Fen, it was me. I provoked that growl. I have wanted, from the first, to be answered by you and not obeyed. My wolf only ever agreed with the man for once. His hand found my unhurt one. You told me my armour was a cage. You were right. You have just watched it nearly get me killed. Stay, not as my subject, not as a lower mega I am raising up, but as the one wolf in this kingdom who will look me in the eye and tell me when I am wrong, out loud, in front of everyone, for the rest of my life. I stood in the challenge circle with a bound shoulder and a kneeling king and the whole court watching, and I did the thing I have apparently become unable to stop doing, which is tell the truth. I've spent 26 years keeping my wolf small so no one would kill me for it, I said, and the whole hall leaned in to hear the Omega answer the king. And the first time I let her stand up, it was at you, by accident, and you laughed instead of killing me. I let him see me smile, though my shoulder was on fire. I'm not going to make her small again. Not for you, not for your court, not for anyone. You want a wolf who'll growl at you when you deserve it? I'm the cheapest one you'll ever find. I've been doing it for free since the day we met. I closed my hand around his. That's not a Luna's decision. It's just mine and my wolf's, and for once we're in complete agreement." He laughed then, that same startled, warm, unguarded sound, in front of the whole court, and this time no one was afraid of it, and he kissed me, one breath, no more. A kiss that said a whole sentence and did not need to become a scene. And what broke open in me was not the thing the songs promise. It was recognition, plain and total, the vertigo of being answered, all the way down. By a man who had spent 10 years being obeyed and never once met. And who chose, in front of the pack that wanted me silenced, to want a wolf who would never ever stay small for him. His wolf shoved its great head between us and growled, softly, delighted, and I growled back, and the beast's tail went, and the two of us finished the argument the only way our kind knows how. And the court, I am told, simply gave up trying to understand it. A year on, I am the Luna of the Iron Territories, which still strikes me as a clerical error committed by a very confused pack. My shoulder healed to a long pale scar I will carry for good, the cost of the thing, written where I can see it, and I have never once been sorry for it. Thorn touches it sometimes without meaning to, the way you touch a thing that frightened you. I never mention it. Some things you give a person by not watching them. The hall is different now. I did not expect that to be the thing that changed most, but it was. A court that once flinched at the king's silence now lives in the sound of his laughing. Because it turns out, a king who is allowed to be answered is a king who is allowed to be a person, and a person laughs. The low pack does not cower the way it did. The deaf still-room woman keeps her grain, and 3 other women like her have learned that the Luna will hear a grievance the ranked lords would wave away, and I hear every one of them. Because I have not forgotten for a single day what it is to be too low to be listened to. A letter came last week from the warrior who cheated the deaf woman at that very first hearing, the one whose lie started all of this, writing now, very carefully, to congratulate the new Luna, and to hope that old misunderstandings might be set aside. I had Callum write the reply, since my hand for letters is poor from a life spent fetching and mending. I did not gloat. Gloating and grace wear the same coat, in my experience, and it is hard to tell them apart from a distance, easier up close, where you can see which one is smiling. I informed him that the Luna set aside nothing, forgot nothing, and would be watching his tallies personally, and that he might reflect, in the meanwhile, on the fact that his small, ugly theft of an old woman's grain was the thing that put a growl in my throat in the first place, and look where that ended. Thorn found me dictating it at his own table, in the seat at his right hand, his wolf a warm weight across both our feet, growling softly in its sleep at some dream I would have given a great deal to hear. "What are you telling him?" the king asked, reading over my shoulder. "The truth," I said, that she didn't mean to do it, that her instincts just forgot, for 1 second, who they were talking to. I set down the pen, and that it turned out to be the best mistake either of us ever made. Because you'd been waiting 10 years for someone too low to know she was supposed to stay quiet, and I'd been waiting my whole life for someone who'd laugh instead of putting me down for it. So before I let you go, tell me what you think. Because I have turned it over for a year and I still cannot settle it. Do you believe him, that it was truly the man and not the wolf, that a proud king reached all the way down to the bottom of his own pack and picked a fight with me on purpose, because he was that starved to be answered? Or do you think he only tells it that way now to make a grand story of a thing his beast started, and it really was the wolf all along, running ahead of him the way they always do? Tell me your theory below. I have lived inside the answer for a year, and I still cannot decide which of them is lying to me, the man or the wolf. And if you want to stay in this hall, the grievances I hear, the laughter that used to be a silence, whatever fight my honest mouth picks next, comment the wolf and follow along, because I have made a whole new life out of not keeping my wolf small. And I promise you it is not finished having things to say. Where are you listening from tonight? Come sit at the low tables, where I still take my grievances. There is room, and someone will listen, and if a king says something he shouldn't, you are welcome to growl.